When I married my husband, I was in the Marine Corps. So I've done a lot of travel my entire career. I didn't know if my marriage would do well when we see each other all the time. I kind of contributed that maybe things were so good for each other because we both were very, very busy professionals who had our own lives as well as our relationship, and that we had lots of professional respect for each other and support for each other. And so I always thought that that was part of our strength.
One of the questions I want to ask is, who is the other half of you?
Oh, sure.
How did you meet? What does he do?
Yeah. So my other half is Matt Hyde. He goes by Weird at First on Twitter, but he doesn't tweet much. Today, he's a pen tester. He builds Hack the Boxes. He participates in those. So he's an OSCP red team type. He probably would
yin and yang.
Yin and yang, but we actually both met in the Marine Corps, fixing jets. He was my collateral duty inspector, the person who inspected my work on the first aircraft I ever fixed in the Marine Corps. He got out, studied network security, became a network engineer, worked in government while I was working government contracting. There were periods where we lived apart. There were periods where I deployed, the whole nine. And now he does what he does in his office right upstairs, and from me doing what I do in his office downstairs. But I would say we probably have more test networks in our house and more computers than most people. If anyone was ever to try to serve a warrant and forensicate this house, I'd feel really, really bad for them.
Yeah, that'd be a long day.
It would be more than a long day. There is more.
But I bet it's not dirty. At least there would be that. The people showing up at your house, it's not going to be filthy. It's not.
No. My house is actually
smells
very, very nice and organized. It does smell nice. I have lavender essential oils when you enter. But but they'd be like, why are there bins of about 250 phones, and why are there 25 computers in this room, and why are there 8 live networks in this house? But it's because we're always setting up test networks. We have the kids on separate segmented networks for school that have specific shut off and on times.
Of course you do.
Well, yeah. And we have rules about, like, he can't hack on my test networks that I'm using for, like, we have to have rules and boundaries for each other's spaces.
You guys have policies and procedures.
we kind of do, yeah. I'd say we have a household SOP. Every once in a while, I'd have a case where I would, really quickly have the image, and I'd run IEF, and I'd produce a preliminary report very, very quickly, just highlighting some IEF results with my whole plan of what I wanted to do to dig deeper. And oftentimes on those cases where IEF results were showing enough, I didn't get to work that further plan, and I'd be told, Jessica, your hours on that case are done. Go ahead and close it up. And it's more because time was money, and those results were enough for whatever organization it was to be able to come to an agreement. It's be able to say, hey, this isn't wrongful termination, whatever the situation was in that case. I mean, there definitely were cases where I got to investigate deeper, but oftentimes those IEF results would stab me because I wanted to be doing deep dive work. So,
please enter the pass. You have joined the meeting as an attendee and will be muted throughout the meeting.
Please be seated, court is in session.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can.
All right, I appreciate the time. I appreciate people's patience. Jurors, I appreciate your patience. So, your next witness, Mr. Brennan.
The Commonwealth calls Jessica Hyde.
All right, Mr. Brennan, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Jessica Hyde, Jessica, space Hyde.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a digital forensics examiner. I'm also an an adjunct professor at George Mason University, where I teach mobile device forensics in their graduate program. I also own a digital forensics company that does training, services, and research.
In addition to teaching at Georgetown University, do you teach in other ways?
Correction, I teach at George Mason University,
I'm
not
sorry.
Georgetown. But thank you. I also teach, my company writes and develops training courses I teach a mobile forensic analysis course and a data structures course there to law enforcement, civilians, etc.
Do you engage in any other type of academics or research?
I do other research as part of some volunteer activities I do in the digital forensics field. So I'm the chair of DFIR Review, which is a body that reviews practitioner-created research so that it can go through peer review. I often do reviews as a member of a reviewer for Forensic Science International Digital Investigations Journal, which I was a previous associate editor of.
What does peer
Oh, I'm so sorry.
What does peer review mean?
Peer review means that when a study is done or a research paper is done on a topic, that an assessment is done of it. There are 3 types of assessments that can be done. One is a methodological assessment, where you read through the methodology of the academic or practitioner-created paper and state if it is acceptable or not. The second is you conduct your own testing using the same methodology to conduct a peer review with your own generated data sets. And the third is if the original author has shared their data sets, reviewing their data sets and checking that against their work.
Has any of your work been peer reviewed in the past?
I've had 2 peer-reviewed journals. I've had an article that was peer-reviewed and published in Forensic Science International Digital Investigations regarding the standardization of file classification of recovered items. The layman's term of that would be talking about what deleted means. And then I have another paper that's been accepted that I was a co-author on in terms of timelines and correlations of forensic evidence.
You mentioned you work in forensic data analysis. Generally, what does that mean?
It means that I look at evidence of digital forensics devices, be them mobile phones, computers, Internet of Things devices, and do analysis to provide meaning and context to the data that's recovered from them, as well as performing data recovery of those same computer-related devices.
Did you have any specific education or training to learn about forensic data?
I'll give you the little teaser that I may teach graduate school now and have a master's degree, but I was a high school dropout. And I'll save my origin story for that, but I'll kind of tell you a little bit more about how I got here.
Absolutely. I have professional training both from courses I've taken as well as I have a master's in digital forensics from George Mason University. A master's degree in that. I've taken multiple courses, advanced mobile analysis, iOS forensics courses from SANS, computer forensics courses from SANS. I have multiple certifications. I hold the GIAC GCFE, which is the GIAC Certified Forensics Examiner. I also hold the NWC 3CFE, which is a Certified Forensics Examiner.
Do you, through your company, teach other forensic examiners how to study forensic data?
Correct. I teach government agencies, both federal and state and local, how to do digital forensic analysis, as well as private sector digital forensics examiners.
How do you teach private digital forensic examiners? What's the method?
I've developed an online virtual course that we teach virtual live, so I'm always there when I'm teaching.
When you're looking at a forensic device and you're analyzing it, do you rely on any tools?
That is a really interesting question.
One time I had a phone, and it was for a really important case. And I knew how to get into this phone manually, but it was not supported by any of the commercial tools, and I had all the commercial tools at the time. At the time, I also happened to be a beta tester for Magnet Acquire, when it was first released. So I'm a beta tester for MagnetAcquire. And one of the cool things was that the logs were really robust, so I knew what it was doing. And so I had this phone in evidence, no commercial tool supported. And I was like, hey, I know how to get into this phone manually. I know what route I can use. I can get a full physical. I did the right thing because I couldn't do it directly on the evidence. I ordered exemplars of the device, proved my process, wrote up the document, gave it to the case agent, said, hey, can I do this to the device? Here's my exemplar. I know it works. And they said, this is going to trial. This is a really big case. We don't want you to do that thing. We want you to use a tool. So I was like, you know what? I actually think Acquire will actually apply the same route I'm using. So I went to one of my test devices, and it was in beta, and I tested it, and it worked. And it had really robust logs. So I went back to the case agent and said, look, this tool is in beta. It's not released yet. I'm a beta tester. I can prove that it does the thing. But it's a tool doing it, not me. Can I use this? And I said, their logs are robust, and I showed them, and they said yes, and I did it. And we were able to get into that device, and that device was major in the case.
Reliance on tools is not precisely what we do. We utilize tools to extract data from a device, and then we utilize a variety of tools to attempt to parse results from those devices.
Is there any shortcomings or dangers in simply relying on a forensic tool for a result or an opinion?
There is absolutely a danger in just relying on parsed results. When an algorithm is used to determine what data is stored as, it doesn't tell you what that data means, and that's where you need a forensics examiner. Tools don't necessarily understand how the data got there and what causes the data to exist, and that takes deeper and further human analysis.
Were you asked by the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office to look at and analyze a phone that was related to a person by the name of Jennifer McCabe?
Yes, with a very, very specific scope to a specific date range.
Were you asked during that scope and date range to analyze it and provide an opinion about whether there were any user-initiated deletions of any web searches or Safari-type searches?
Yes, I was asked to look for deletions of Safari searches within the scope of the time frame that was dictated by the purpose of the exam.
Were you asked to look at the phone device and determine whether or not there were any user-initiated deletions of phone calls on the device?
Yes, I was asked to look for deletions of phone calls in that same date range.
And did you do both of those tasks?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you do anything to ensure the integrity of the data that you were looking at?
Upon receiving the forensic image, the first thing I did was I did what's called a hash of the image. So a hash is an algorithmic representation of a file. So a forensic image, all the data from the phone, it comes in one file that can then be extracted and have the rest of the data. That singular file that's received, there's actually 3, but focusing on the one that has all of the data, that archive file, you can run what's called a hash algorithm against it. There's actually multiple hash algorithms, and I hashed it, and then I validated that hash to the document that was provided along with the image file that contained the hashes that were contained in. Those hash values matched. Now, just for clarity, if you change one bit in a file, it will not have the same hash. So the hash provides integrity, and having used both hashes, which are available in that report, and ran 2 different algorithms, they both matched.
Oh, was my mic on?
Additionally, I reviewed the PDF that was received for signs of alteration. The PDF that comes with a Great Key report is not signed by Adobe Acrobat. However, I was able to take that PDF and then examine it just like I would a phone. So I'm using the same techniques on the phone. Using a tool called EXIF tool, I was able to learn a lot about the creation of that particular PDF. And what I was able to learn about it was that it was created by, it's labeled it as being produced by Grayshift using a particular code-based application to create the PDF called EYF PDF. standing for Python Framework PDF.
That's such a great question. Is he bleeding? How does this prove that Karen hit Sean? It doesn't. This is in defense of Jennifer McCabe. This entire expert is hired to defend Jennifer McCabe. Because if Jennifer McCabe's phone searched "Lost Long to Dying Cold" at 2:27 a.m., that leads to consciousness of guilt on the part of Jennifer McCabe. And that's a problem for somebody in the Commonwealth who wants to protect Jennifer McCabe. But I would submit to you that even if she didn't search it at 2:27 a.m. and searched it in the morning, nobody other than Jennifer McCabe says that Karen told her to search it, other than Jennifer McCabe.
Did you come to an opinion whether or not the phrase "How's long to die in cold" was actually searched at 2:27 a.m. on January 29, 2022?
Because Kerry Roberts lied to the grand jury, and that could still show consciousness of guilt on behalf of Jennifer McCabe for searching that.
There are no artifacts.
So the answer is yes or no?
Can you repeat the question,
Yes.
please?
See?
And so based on your analysis of the phone and the data using all of those softwares, did you come to an opinion whether or not the phrase "How's long to die in cold" was searched at that timestamp tab of 2:27:40?
Yes, I came to an opinion.
And what is your opinion?
Objection, Your Honor.
Rephrase the question as to the opinion.
I'm sorry?
I'll see you at sidewalks, Mr. Alessi.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You share with us that you had an opinion regarding the timestamp and whether that it was applicable to the search term "How's long to die in cold."
That is correct.
Now I want to ask you, to a reasonable degree of forensic data, scientific certainty, what is your opinion about whether the phrase "How's long to die in cold" was made at the time of the timestamp 2:27:40?
Objection, Your Honor. I agree with
It's the last time, Mr. Alessi, on this issue, okay? All right, go right ahead, Mr. Brennan.
I'm now going to ask you for your first opinion. So you shared that you have an opinion about whether that timestamp 2:27:40 was, whether or not that was the time the search "How's long to die in the cold" occurred. Can you tell us, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, your opinion about whether that search, "How's long to die in the cold," occurred at 2:27:40 a.m. on January 29th, 2022?
Waive objection, Your Honor.
Okay, the objections are overruled.
What I can state to a scientific degree of certainty is that that search occurred at 6:24 a.m. and was the last search in the tab that had been opened at 2:27.
Do you have an opinion, to a degree of scientific certainty, whether there was any other searches similar to "How's long to die in the cold" that evening on that tab?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow it.
May I first inquire, you meant morning, I
I'm sorry,
assume?
that morning, yes.
Just clarifying, I did not look at evening searches. And can you repeat? I apologize. I disrupted my own train of
Do you have
thought.
an opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, whether there were any other searches on that tab before the final search at 6:24:47, "How's long to die in cold"?
Waive objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Just ensuring that I have the question correct.
Please.
You're asking if what else occurred in that tab prior?
Yes.
That I cannot say with a clear degree of certainty.
Did you develop a chalk that I
I
showed
did.
you earlier?
Yes.
Like to approach?
Yes.
Again, I show you. Same document, you recognize it?
Yes.
What is it?
It is the exhibit that I created that was labeled Table 1 in the first report I had delivered.
And does that provide information that will assist us in understanding your opinion?
Yes.
I'd move, subject to redaction, that this be introduced into evidence.
Your Honor, I have no issue with regard to the redaction aspect, but consistent with my prior objections, I would object to that.
Okay, I'm going to allow this into evidence. Your rights are safe, Mr.
Thank you,
Alessi.
Your Honor. I appreciate it.
So given that you've used multiple tools to look at reports regarding this phrase, how long to die in cold, and have seen indications or characterizations of recovered and carved, and in addition to the fact that you actually analyzed the data, did you arrive at an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether or not the user deleted, any user deleted the phrase, how long to die in cold?
My opinion is there was no deletion that occurred by the user because it is not something a user can delete.
Finally, I want to ask you about your analysis of the phone records on this phone attributed to Ms. McCabe. Did you go through an analysis of the phone logs and the phone records on the phone?
I analyzed the call logs and the phone logs on the device that I was given, that I was told belonged to Ms. McCabe, yes.
Would a suggestion or a claim that a user deleted irregularly a number of phone calls, would that be accurate or inaccurate in your experience?
It is inaccurate in this instance.
Can you explain to us why and how you came to that conclusion?
Yeah, this is actually really interesting because of what it appears in the forensics tools and additional artifacts that I looked at that are not parsed by the forensics tools. So the call logs, when you look at it, it appears, I don't remember if it's 8:57 or 8:59 a.m. in my mind at the moment, but approximately either 8:57 or 8:59 is the earliest phone call we see on the 29th of January. We see no call logs before, but we do see FaceTime logs before. So if an examiner, again, was making assumptions without testing or reviewing, the first assumption might be, well, things must have been deleted because there's data that exists before, but not current data. So then you have to go, how do phone logs work? And again, create test data and review. What the situation here is that there are 3 types of call logs on this particular phone. There's regular calls, incoming and outgoing. There are FaceTime video chats, incoming and outgoing, and FaceTime audio chats, incoming and outgoing. The storage for that is actually 200 records. So you can only store up to 200 of each. Afternoon, Your Honor.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hyde.
Good afternoon.
I notice you have some documents with you. Could you just state what is in front of you so I know that I might be able to help expedite this if I know what you have in front of you?
Absolutely. I have the first digital forensic analysis report I completed for the previous trial.
Do you have a date? You have several of them.
I do. It's the first one. I apologize. This is the one, I believe it's May. I don't remember the
May
date
of
off the top of my head.
2023,
May of
perhaps?
2023, obviously. Then I have the second one. This was the one that was used in the pretrial motion.
December 2024?
December 20, yes, that's correct. Very nice. Then I have the third one. This is the final one regarding the phone that was identified as Ms. McCabe's.
Yes.
And then I do have the opinion from State versus Huera, but if we don't need that, that's fine.
You were involved in a case, is actually a murder trial in the state of Maryland in a case called State v. Herrera as recently as March of 2025, correct?
Correction, it's an attempted murder.
Attempted murder. And in that particular case, you had attempted to offer various opinions to the court, correct?
I object.
You have to move along from this case, from what you're talking about. You have to move along from that Maryland case.
So with regard, do you recall another case from the state of Massachusetts, Arrington case, in which you submitted a pro se amicus? Do you recall that case?
I do.
And is it correct that in that case you submitted arguments on behalf of the prosecution in that case?
I submitted an amicus brief, which is not on behalf of anybody. It's as a friend of the court.
Right, but the Friends of the Court, you took a position in that, quote, Friends of the Court brief, correct?
Took a position on the evidence.
Right, and the position you took on the evidence was that the frequent location history data is reliable and should be used. Is that correct?
That amicus does discuss frequent location history records, and I want to be clear, it speaks to both bias on both sides and negative and positive of submitting it. It was an unbiased writing, and it was not specifically in support of the prosecution.
So you are testifying in this case on behalf of the prosecution, correct?
In this case, I was hired by the prosecution,
Right.
that's correct.
Made a statement, have you not, that from 12:20:50 a.m. on January 29th of 2022 and after, there is no indication of interaction with the device. Is that correct?
There is no indication of user interaction with the device. There is all received until about 6:04 a.m. when there is again Apple Health data that picks up.
We can see active interaction with the mobile device up until 12:20:50 a.m. ET. Do you see that statement?
Yes.
And then if you skip down, I'm going to skip a couple sentences to the paragraph under the chart, and this is the key part.
Okay.
It says, from that point, and I'm understanding that point to be the 12:20:50 a.m., correct? You need to say yes or no, I'm sorry.
Yes.
There is no indication of interaction with the device. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct.
And you believe that statement is correct?
Until 6 something a.m.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just asking if that statement is correct. Not if you have other information, but is that statement correct?
I object.
Can you answer that? Who's Hyde? Can you answer that, yes or no?
Did I read that correctly?
You read it correctly,
Thank
yes.
you. If we could, Your Honor, and publish Exhibit 39. And it will be, thank you. And if we could go to slide 82, please. If I could draw your attention to the entry that is, it says 3209 under App Lock. I'm going to read what it says in red, and this is a timeline of Mr. Whiffen. You know Mr. Whiffen?
I do know Mr. Whiffen.
And so he put in red, not us, he said device locked with lock button for the last time. Do you see that?
I do.
And you know that to lock a phone, you actually have to hit the side button with regard to an iPhone to make it lock. Do you know that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that is an interaction with a phone, is it not?
I concur.
So that means that that interaction with the phone occurred at 12:32:09, correct?
I did not review that specific artifact. I cannot attest to Mr. Whiffen's exam, only to my own.
So do you have any reason to believe that what is in evidence in this case that Mr. Whiffen has produced, and that do you have any basis to contest the fact that the device was locked with a lock button for the last time on the phone of John O'Keefe at 12:32:09 as you sit here?
I cannot contest it because I do not recall looking at that specific artifact.
Don't you think it would have been appropriate to be accurate as a digital forensic analyzer on the topic of the last of an indication of interaction with the device? Don't you think it would have been appropriate to look at that 12:32:09 in any of the tools you said you used on direct?
I did not correlate that artifact in my timeline.
I understand you didn't, and my question is, do you understand that in this case, as in many cases, that matters of seconds in activity can be determinative of a case? Do you understand that from your experience?
Absolutely.
So it's important, therefore, to get activity right for any data forensic examiner when they're issuing reports about activity, particularly of a decedent. Is that important?
Absolutely.
So isn't it correct that the statement that you make on page 7 of your report, that from that point, 12:20:50, there is no indication of interaction with the device, is incorrect?
I cannot make that without going back and reviewing and validating the artifact you just produced from Mr. Whiffen. I would need to validate that in order to respond to that.
But as you sit here, you have no basis to contest what Mr. Whiffen has stated, that there was a lock button on the side of the phone of Mr. O'Keefe a full 12 minutes after you say there was no interaction with the device. Is that correct?
I don't. I would have to review that portion.
Is there anything that had prevented you from reviewing that in that data before you wrote this report?
Not that I can think of. I would have to go and re-review that.
My question is...
I don't know if that artifact, I have not reviewed that artifact, so I cannot speak to an artifact I have not reviewed, and I did not, that is not my report, that's Mr. Whiffen's report, so I cannot speak to that without going back and reviewing that evidence.
Isn't the interaction with the device, a lock button, readily available to you in the data that you have and had in your possession when you wrote this report?
Yes.
Thank you. Starting at 12:01 a.m. on January 29, 2022, the mobile phone was in use with activity of Waze navigating to 34 Fairview Drive, Canton, MA, active interaction with the screen, steps, audio playing text messages and calls until 12:31 a.m. EST on January 29, 2002. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
That statement is also incorrect, isn't it?
On what basis?
Do you believe that statement is correct or incorrect?
I believe that the statement is correct regarding those artifacts that are mentioned in that statement, yes.
Okay, if you could please, if you could turn to page 1535 of the same report. And do you see an entry that says 12:31:56, which is the same time in the conclusion, but I'm going to develop it.
I believe I know where you're going.
Well, hold on. I'm sorry. I need to ask the
apologize.
questions.
Yes.
I appreciate you looking to help, but if I could, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So it's got health steps, and it has steps 36, duration 20.9 or 20.398 seconds. Did I read that correctly?
That is absolutely correct.
So if you look at this data point in your report on page 13, the steps began at 12:31:56, but they ended 20.39 seconds later at 12:32:16. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So therefore, your statement in your conclusion, if you could go back to 50, and this is in your conclusion, your statement there is that the steps, the mobile phone is used with activity, including steps, until 12:31 a.m. EST. That should read until 12:32:16, correct?
It depends on your interpretation of interaction. As a user is walking, they're not actively interacting with their device. It's their movement that is. It's not direct interaction with the screen. But I would agree to your view that that could be interpreted as needing an additional 20 seconds.
When it comes to steps, is not calibrating using the screen, but the phone is calculating steps taken. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, but that's not interactivity with the device.
I understand,
Yes.
but the sentence reads includes steps, and the more accurate way to have stated that would have been to put 12:32:16 instead of 12:31 a.m., correct? Isn't the more correct way to state this important data point in your conclusion, instead of saying active interaction with the screen and steps, etc., until 12:31 a.m. EST, the 12:31 should be 12:32, because the steps that you have on your page 13, by what you concede, is the duration of 20 would have brought it to 12:32:16, correct?
I would state that depends. I believe either is a correct way to state that. Based on interactivity, based on your interpretation, your definition is more correct.
Okay, thank you. And it's not my interpretation, I'm reading from your report, correct?
Your interpretation that 1232 is a more correct representation of interaction is based on your theory that interaction concludes when the steps end. And I'm saying both would be acceptable.
Okay, so let's follow up on this.
Sure.
Isn't it correct that it isn't my theory when the steps ended?
Oh, it's not,
if I could just finish,
Please, absolutely,
because if we talk over each other, the stenographer's not going to get both of us. Thank
Agreed.
you. So, it's not my theory, it's just the simple math from an entry you've made on page 13 that the steps began at 12:31:56. They ended 20.398 seconds after that, which just doing the simple math is 12:32:16. Did I do the math correctly?
That is correct.
Okay,
I'm not
thank you.
debating that.
Thank you very much. Let us now go to the timestamp of 2:27:40. Your opinions on what is the meaning of that timestamp have varied from May of 2023 until today. Is that correct?
No, that is incorrect.
Let's cover that issue.
Sure.
How many interactions have you had with Lieutenant Detective Brian Tully on this case approximately? Is it more than 5?
Yes.
Is it more than 10?
Yes.
Is it more than 20?
I don't know.
Your use of various forensic tools that revealed a timestamp, 2:27:40 a.m. timestamp on January 29, 2022. Is that correct? Is that a fair characterization of an issue you looked at?
Correct.
So it reads, in the instance of the Google search, house long to die in cold, that was recovered from the write-ahead log associated with the X-Browser State DB SQLite database with the timestamp of 2:27:40 a.m. was marked by Celebrite as having this timestamp and being deleted. Did I read that correctly?
Fair. Yes.
So there were 2 searches of interest that took place on the iOS device, and we're talking about Jennifer McCabe's device, correct?
The device that was identified to me as Jennifer McCabe's. Yes.
That's identified to you as Jennifer McCabe. And it's what you talked about on direct examination as
Absolutely,
her device, right?
yes.
It's not a mystery as to whose it is. It's not like you don't know, right?
In direct, I also use the phrase identified to me as Jennifer McCabe's.
Right, but your conclusion is the device you've been working on and analyzing for 2 years is the device of Jennifer McCabe.
That is how it was identified to me.
Do you have a different conclusion as to whose device it is?
I always am very, very careful that I do not assess the ownership. That was information that was given to me, not information that I personally assessed.
So are you uncertain as to whether the device you've been working on for 2 years is the phone of Jennifer McCabe?
The device that I have been working on for 2 years is the device that was identified to me by the Massachusetts State Police, Detective Tully, as belonging to Jennifer McCabe when I began working and received that device.
In the instance of the Google search, house long to die in cold that was recovered from the write-ahead log associated with
That's correct.
the X-Browser stage with a timestamp of 2027:40 a.m. was marked by Celebrite as having this timestamp and being deleted. Did I read that correctly?
You read that correctly.
Now let's move ahead. Page 7 of your report. Importantly, at this time, you state, testing shows great inconsistency with timestamps parsed from this file. It is, however, definitive that the page existed in a tab.
Correct.
While a definitive reason as to why the timestamp is listing the time of 2:27:40 is unknown, the time is inconsistent with the timestamps associated with the same search. Did I read that correctly?
You did read it correctly.
So as of May 2023, you said the definitive reason as to why the timestamp is listed as 2:27:40 is unknown, correct? I'm just asking, is that what you wrote? Unknown.
I believe that the wording here is, sorry, I know I do use the word unknown. It says, while a definitive reason as to why the timestamp listing is the time of 02/27/40 is unknown. Sorry.
So you use the word unknown, your word in your report.
Yes.
Okay, and this is your testimony. On line 16, I have them in the timestamp order that is associated with the artifact. You use that word associated again, correct? Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And that's associated with the Google search "House Long to Die in the Cold" in a 2:27:40 a.m. timestamp, correct?
That is correct.
Browser state DB is an artifact that speaks to when tabs are moved. So when you're using your browser and you open different tabs, you may have a search that this time pertains to the time that the tab moved. It could be lots of things. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Not one thing, you said it could be lots of things, correct?
That is correct.
And you testified, we cannot tell by this particular artifact what time that search occurred. Did
Absolutely.
I read that correctly?
Specifically pertaining to that particular artifact that in browser state DB, that does not tell us what time a search occurred. That is correct.
Right. So you stated, and it was your statement then, we cannot tell by this particular artifact what time that search occurred, correct?
That particular artifact.
Okay, so now let's keep going. Line 1. 2:27 isn't necessarily one time when the tab was closed. That's in my report. I say it's undetermined. Remember we were just reading your undetermined in your May 23 report?
Correct.
Because there's a lot of things that can cause that timestamp to be there, including tab being moved, tab being minimized. The next sentence. I don't know exactly what caused the tab to get that particular entry, but it's not, that timestamp is not indicative of the time of the search or any URL that's visited. But the first part of it is, I don't know exactly what caused the tab to get that particular entry. Did I read that correctly?
You read 100% correctly.
Thank you. Now if we could turn to page 130 of your testimony.
I need to object.
All right, I'll see you both.
You were asked when you began working on analyzing phones in this case, and you said it was in May. Is that of May of 2023?
May of 2023. May 4th, 2023 is the email I have of a note. Thank you. Yes. It's easy to remember because May the 4th be with you.
When you first were asked to begin work on this case in May of 2023, what was the catalyst for you to begin working on this?
I was contacted by Mr. Tully and then contracted, a SOW was signed, and I began work on the initial request to look at those two search terms on January 29th. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Okay.
Was there a certain claim that was lodged that you were to focus on?
I was to focus on the two search terms from January 29th, 2022.
Ms. Hyde, you were asked questions by Mr. Brennan just moments ago about Celebrite and release notes. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
And did Celebrite, beyond stating that their opinion was the 2:20:40 a.m. timestamp was not reliable, did they give any reason at all for why they concluded it was not reliable in that? I'm sorry, we'll wait for the...
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I'll repeat the question.
Thank you.
In that release note, does Celebrite state any reason for why they wrote not a reliable timestamp? Not asking you to read it, just asking whether or not they give any reason for the conclusion not a reliable timestamp.
One moment, Yes, they do. They state that further research since is the reason that they're doing it, that there's further research.
Do they state what that research is?
They don't, but
All right, but they don't state what the further research is.
that is correct. They
All right,
state
now
that
what I'd like
it's
to do
unreliable.
is move on to, let's now go to hopefully what are the last two categories of questions. With regard to the iPhone of Jen McCabe, did you analyze her phone at all for deletions?
I analyzed her phone to see if there had been deletions of call logs, and what I found was that there were records that were removed by the system and not recoverable from that database, but were recoverable from biomes.
Understood. You talked about, in response to Attorney Brennan, the 12/31/56 steps, and you said the last, according to you, last movement 12/32/16. To boil it down, isn't it correct that that phone was moving at that time?
12/31/56, is that
Yeah,
the...
that's the start, yep.
Oh, yes, this one there definitely is. Yes, yes, yes.
So, doesn't matter what kind of movement, but that phone was moving starting at 12/31/56 and still moving until 12/32/16 a.m. on January 29, 2022, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate again your answering my questions.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hyde, you're all set.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I would like to play clip 15, please.
Absolutely more than Jen McCabe. Jen McCabe, it's me or her. Either I'm going down, Jen, or you are.
So, folks, I talked to the lawyers briefly about scheduling at sidebar, and I'm told we're actually ahead of schedule. So with that, rather than beginning a witness who's probably going to take a while, we may as well let you go and enjoy the rest of this beautiful afternoon. So we're on schedule, ahead of schedule. We'll reevaluate that tomorrow, and I will see the lawyers at sidebar after there as well, about just to talk a little bit about scheduling.